Welcome y'all to the Minigame Project series. In this playlist, I'm diving into a collection of interactive, browser-based minigames, each designed to showcase some versatility and simplicity of our friend jQuery right there for DOM manipulation and event handling. But why jQuery in 2024? It remains a powerful tool for web development. It has tons of ease of use. It's very cross-browser compatible, and it has a terrific, vibrant community. I mean, it's been around for forever. It's got a lot of things you could Google and find answers on. And I did a video recently on jQuery's 4.0 beta update, and I was like, well, you know what? I haven't built something simple in a while, so let's stick to an old school project structure of HTML, CSS, and JS. No TypeScript in the way, even though I prefer TypeScript. No bundlers in the way, no compilers in the way, no transpilers in the way, none of that crazy stuff. I felt like building something for fun and old school and have some fun with it. So join me as we are going to learn some more about game mechanics, tackle some coding challenges, and unleash our creativity, all while honing our web development skills. Whether you're a beginner or you're looking to get yourself fired up or reminded of how things used to be, if you've only coded React, like me, maybe you've only coded React projects for so long that you kind of want to break from it and go back to the basics. This is the series for you. I hope there's something here for everyone. So we're going to dive in and explore this exciting mini game. We're making a card memory game. So remember, this is a playlist. I have 2 other videos in this series where I start this project. I code out the basics of it and the basics and beginning of the game logic, introducing some jQuery here. So you will be lost if you don't go watch those 2 previous videos. This is meant to be a long-running series with a short intro for each one. There we go. So we had left off where I had these cards flipping back, and we don't have them finding that we get a match, like that right there. Like, I need to be able to now worry about these 2 getting a match. But we have, like, the basic functionality of the game pretty much in place. It is now going to be about actually making them understand they're a match and then flipping back rather than just flipping back right away. We have to wait for 2 cards being selected, hint. Then check for a match. If they're not a match, flip them back. If they are a match, we're going to start with logging that, and then we'll worry about actually marking them for a match. This one may not be as long because the game logic is almost done. At that point, it'll be about scaling it up with more cards, maybe a difficulty slider, maybe switching from letters to emojis, CSS to display the cards, and having like some kind of game result counter or game reset ability. And then eventually around that shell of this game, building out the rest of the website. So I gotta say, shout out to Covalence where I work, self-promo. Check the description down below for multiple things. The repository for this where you can go along to the end of my videos, get that commit, clone the code at that commit, or just clone the code and switch to that commit to follow along with me if you want to, or you can always look at the code at the end of the video and pull from it. I do suggest you write it yourself rather than just copy and pasting, as you will, even if you don't know what's going on, you will learn a lot via writing it yourself. Like I was saying, shout outs to Covalence. We have a community membership, so if you want to learn the basics of HTML, CSS, JS, go from zero to hero with my React course, learn Node server-side development with Express and MySQL and things like that, how to deploy React Native. If you have interest in that stuff, we have a community membership where we have our courses available for $20 a month. You get access to all of our courses, any updates I give to them, which I try and do every week or 2 to have some kind of update in our course. I'm also working on new courses. They will be available with no extra cost to you in your membership. And you'll also have access to our Discord, where we have a supportive and fun-friendly community of people on this journey together. So, picking up where we left off, let's actually code. Let's see. We left off. That's right. So, I had left off with this set timeout right here. And also, shout-outs to my chroma key, green screen, not keying out my green shirt. It's fading. It's like a deep green in real life. And I sat down to record, and I looked down, and I'm like, I'm going to be a disembodied head and neck floating in the camera, but hey, the green is not this green screen back here. So it's a different color, and it's only a little faded out and not just invisible. So shout outs to chroma key technology in OBS. Okay. We need to remove this logic here because right now we have it hard coded that no matter what happens, we click a card inside the game board. Remember, we talked about event delegation in the previous video, why we chose to do it this way. We're going to be worrying at some point probably about passing in the correct reference of the card and down into functions and to remember which card has been clicked via closures and whatnot. And, you know, we simply add the class flipped, we flip the card, and then after 1 second, we flip it back over. But we need to actually worry about some different logic, meaning maybe I want to prevent, because also I can click on a card as many times as I want and continually add the flip class to it, which, functionality wise isn't breaking, but it does mess with the flow of the rendering, the painting of the DOM, where it's constantly adding that class and removing it and queuing up a million times these set timeouts, right? Because technically every single time I spam click the card to click it, it's queuing up a set timeout with a 1-second timer, and I'm basically adding to the call stack over and over and over again, or the event loop, right? It has to keep going and clearing out all these set timeouts I'm doing. So we want to prevent that. So I might just say, for example, if our card, and jQuery has this handy dandy function called hasClass. Remember in previous videos I talked about bringing up a cheat sheet and looking for methods at a high level that I may not know exist on jQuery because I may not use it all the time. I'm not as proficient with it as others, obviously, because this is me trying to dive back into something kind of old school. I was like, oh, hey, hasClass. That's something that could be very useful here. And this cheat sheet in particular is the first one that came up for me on Google, oscarotero.com/jQuery. hasClass, you click on it, it takes you to the API docs, which you can scroll through. But hasClass looks like it tells me pretty straightforward what it's going to do. So I'm going to say if the card doesn't have class flipped, we're going to flip it and then set that timeout. That way we're not just are routinely adding the timeout on it over and over and over again, right? I only want to do this logic should the card not already have that class. That's why we're saying if the card has class flipped, we're taking the opposite of that. So if it has class flipped, that is true, or truthy probably. The opposite of truthy is falsy, which means it skips the if statement. So basically, if it doesn't have flipped, then we flip it and then set the timer to flip it back. So while functionality-wise, there won't be much difference once I save and refresh here of spam clicking the card, I'm not queuing up a whole bunch of timeouts because it's not letting me over add those timeouts to remove class flipped at a later time after writing this if statement around it. So again, this just prevents us from spam clicking the same card and just clogging up our event cycle with a bunch of timers that have to get cleaned out, and then this bit of code ran over and over and over again. So, flipping a card is not particularly complex logic, but it may get different down the line. So I may choose to move that into a utility function to stack inside of here. Unflipping a card will have some more logic associated with it, so we're going to change it here in just a moment. But ultimately, remember the first thing I talked about is we want to wait to flip the cards until I've selected at least 2 to know if they're a match or not. Because the game's kind of stupid if I click and I go, what the heck? How am I supposed to match it if it keeps toggling back and forth every time? Maybe this is a game feature. Maybe you're sitting here and thinking, this is how I want to code the game, Luke. If that's the case, then so be it. So I will add a nested if statement to say, hey, if we're in the logic of either flipping or not flipping cards, I want to unflip the cards only in the case where the length of my flip cards array is 2. Now, we haven't touched this array. I mentioned it early on, I believe, either in the first or second video. I don't have much of a choice. It has to be either the first or second video, where we haven't messed with this flip cards array too much. But basically, this is how we're going to track what cards they have selected, as well as whether we have 1, 0, 1, or 2 cards selected on the screen. So at the moment, this array is never going to grow in size, because I don't think I have any logic that pushes the cards into the array. So it's never going to get to array length 2, meaning at the moment we've successfully made... I got to refresh, that's why. Successfully have made the cards not flip back anymore, but I'm also not pushing into that array, right? So that would be as easy to say as, hey, flipped cards. After I add the flip class to it, I also want to push that card into the array. Maybe I'll push it into the array first and then tell the DOM to update. This is going to be something that's like the smallest of optimizations to say, hey, manipulate the JavaScript memory and code first, then tell it to update the DOM, and then tell it to unflip and update the DOM in the event that that array gets to size 2. So at the moment, all we need to do is to check this, is to save and refresh once again, test it. Oh, that's right. So yeah, the way I have this logic written at the moment makes sense, because by the time this hits 2, the if statement down here only runs on the second click, and it doesn't remove all the cards that are flipped. It only removes the last one I click. So on the second click, the first card gets flipped into the array, and it gets flipped into the visual. And then because the length of the array is 1 at that time, this does not get queued up, which makes sense, right? That's what happens on the first single click. Then the second click adds it to the array. We are now at length 2. It flips that card, but the previous card is gone from this whole logic, remember? And then it says, oh, now the array length is 2. Set the timer to flip the card that was just clicked, represented by that card.remove class right there. Hence why only the second card here is getting flipped over. So what we're actually going to have to do is not just remove the flipped class from the card we had just clicked on, we need to remove it from every card that currently has the flipped class. So I could just say from the cards that are currently flipped in the flipped array, because remember, we're not pushing what type of card it is. We are pushing the entirety of the card, or the element, right? The entirety of the card element itself into the array, so it will know, hey, this card has this class we have to remove. So I'm going to say loop through the flipped cards array that I've been pushing to. For each card we have inside of there, I would like you to do what we did before and removed the flipped class from all cards in the flipped cards array. And while we're here, we might as well tell it to also reassign it to an empty array, because at this point we either got a match or we didn't. So again, we haven't talked about the matching logic yet. We're just trying to get the logic to work on, can we flip 2 cards, and once 2 cards have been flipped, flip them both back rather than one or the other, or have cards flipping at random intervals. So 2 cards, they flip. 1 card, no flip. 2 cards, they flip. 2 separate cards with a delay, and they flip. So there we go. We now have the actual core logic of the game almost done. All we have to do now is be able to determine, if I click these 2, it should probably log not a match. And if I click these 2, it should say is a match. And then from there, we have to determine how we want to visually indicate that these are no longer selectable. Because if I select both of these and we've matched B successfully, these cards should disable, disappear, checkmark, which is what I'm leaning towards going with, replacing the question mark or the card value with a checkmark and dimming it out almost. That's what I mean by disabling it. So we remove the click handler or prevent it from firing and somehow visually indicate to our users, hey, congrats, you matched the Bs of these cards, right? So that's what we're going to be working on next. But like I said, we might as well, depending on how much more complex this is, I may add future logic to when I flip cards and things like that. So let's go ahead and write some other utility functions to help us out here. I'm going to write a function called flip card. It will receive the card element we wish to flip. And there's going to be 2 purposes here. We're going to do a card dot... Oh, well, what am I doing? All I have to do is cut and paste. All I want to do is cut and paste this code to say, hey, if I call flip card and I pass in a card, I need to push that card that I'm flipping into the flip cards array so I can track it for my matching logic and for my unflipping logic. And we also need to actually flip it in the DOM, which is done with this particular jQuery method, the add class method, and right in the name of the class we are using to flip it. So instead of flip card, all I gotta do is call flip card, pass in the card, and wouldn't you know it is as simple as that to make this look nice and tasty and cleaned up a little bit. So we're going to do the same thing for this logic down here for unflipping a card. So we're going to call it function flip. Now this is multiple cards. It's always going to be 2 at least. So we're going to call it flip cards back or unflip cards or something like that. We'll do flip cards back. Unflip cards, flip cards back. What's a better name? Get in the comments if you have one way or another. Yeah, get in the comments if you have a particularly strong gut feeling on this should be unflip cards. Since this is flip card, you idiot. Don't insult me like that. Well, yeah, actually, I don't care what you write. Anyway, all right, whatever. So flip cards back, unflip card. If you have one way or another, get in the comments. Let me know what you prefer and why. So, okay, all it really needs to do is run this. So I'm going to cut that code and move it down to this utility function. Because this is using the array of the flip cards, which is in scope of memory game, so it's in scope of this function. I'm not passing in an argument. All we gotta do is run a set timeout when this function is called that will go through the array of currently flipped cards, unflip them, and also empty the array. Also, the or reassigning, because this is not technically emptying the same array. This is assigning a new array that happens to be empty, not emptying our current array, because arrays are reference data types, meaning that they are not this is not the value that I'm messing with of an array. I'm assigning a whole new array, hence why we had to do let on this one up here, because a lot of my students in my course know that I always declare arrays with const when manipulating them, because with pushing and unshifting and popping and things like that, it's in place and you're messing with the reference of where that array exists in memory. But because I'm taking an easy approach of not emptying all elements, but rather just removing or reassigning a fully new empty array, which is why we need to do the let designation on that array right there, and not a const like my students normally see me do. But all we need to do now is, clearly, since I'm writing the keyword unflip, I feel like my gut is telling me I should have gone with that name here, because I just wrote UN as in to write unflip cards. But yeah, flip cards back should be my logic if 2 or more are selected. So this shouldn't have broken anything. Not flipped. Flipped. Okay, cool. So next step, like I said, is we got to determine if we got ourselves a match at all. And so basically this needs to happen how? Because technically it's not flipping the cards back right away when we have 2 or more flipped cards. We actually need to check them for a match. And in this case, I'll go ahead and write this function out, because we're going to be using, because it's going to have some more logic than I would care to put inside of that if statement for cleanliness and, I don't know, any potential reusability. So I will write check for match, and we're going to say that at some point check for match is going to unflip the cards or flip them back at some point. So rather than flipping the cards back right away when we get 2, I'm going to call check for match first. This will check for a match, and if there is no match, it will then flip the cards back, right? So the idea is if flipped cards match, disable and count them, else flip cards back. That is the general pseudocode logic that we are attempting to do here. And I do recommend for my newer folks out there, a lot of the times for my more veteran developers, like you're already thinking this and you're thinking ahead and whatnot. But remember, trying to make sure I keep this umbrella a bit wider with our potential newbies out here, just like trying to learn some basics of coding on this video, that I try to include some pseudo logic like this. And I still do this to this day, even though a lot of it might be in my head. I'm still thinking about it this way, and I'm trying to give y'all some insight into how you can approach problems with some pseudocode to at least get you going in a direction, even if you determine that direction is wrong later. It's a lot better than just spinning your wheels at not knowing what to do. Just start small, write out pseudocode of what you want it to do, and over time you'll get better at kind of imagining what that looks like and moving forward from there. So first thing I need to do is I need to get my 2 cards, right? So here's a cool trick we're going to use to do this, called an ES6 array destructure. Flipped cards is my array. I am saying from that array, I want to pull out elements and make variables out of them. And remember, at the end of the day, the flipped cards array is an array of 2 jQuery divs. So I can say card1, card2. Meaning, by the time check for match runs, we know there are 2 cards in the array, the first card I clicked on and the second card I clicked on. And I have that array flipped cards in scope of check for match, and I can pull out of it the first element, aka index 0, and call it card 1, and the second element at index 1 and call it card 2. Card 1 and card 2 are variables that I am making up. I could write const pizza, comma, car, and it will still work the same way. Pizza represents the 0 index card. Car represents the first index card. They're just variable names. You make them up, but I think card 1 and card 2 make a lot of sense. This would be equivalent to writing the following. Flipped cards 0, and then another new line of code that would be 1 and 2. This is equivalent in terms of creating variables based off of values at the 0 and 1 index positions of the array. We can just do it in 1 line of code instead of 2 lines of code and show off how cool we are, because that's what it's all about here at the end of the day. And you know what? This is hashtag professional, little coffee on video. Never hurt anybody, did it? That's super professional right there, Luke. Good job, man. Round of applause, round of applause. We're going to fix that. We'll edit that out in post. So yeah, what we're gonna do now is we need to know what type of cards they are. So here's where I was like waffling on how I want to do this. We need to figure out what type of card this is, and there's a couple different ways we could do it. Now, if I look in the Elements tab at the moment and I click on one of my cards, and let's say I'm trying to cheat the game, I see that this card is a B, for example, here, right? So I can automatically say, hey, find the card front, card face div of the card I click on, or I have collected inside of that array, rather. So card 1, let's say we click on this, that's card 1. Card 1 is the variable is now technically, once I click a second card, then it'll be assigned and pulled into the variable. And I need to tell that variable, go into your child elements, find the second div element, or find the one that has the card front class name, and look up its text content. I could do it that way, but let's learn something new here, because that would be fine, but that would also be completely tied on and reliant to what my array of values is. But so is this way, Luke. You think I would have thought about this beforehand. Okay, either way, if you didn't know, in HTML, there are these things called data attributes. And data attributes are like these: class equals, ID equals, style equals. They're all attributes that have attribute name, equal sign, double quotes, and a string value inside that informs the element more about itself. So you can have class selectors, ID selectors. You could do inline styling, and you could also add one, for example, like this, data dash, and that's it. These data dash attributes are literally meant to carry like hidden, and again, I know this is not hidden because it's in the client. Anything running in the client, we can find out. So we can hack this game 10 ways to Sunday unless I start encoding values. But the point is, let's learn something new here. I'm going to rely on this data dash attribute, and after the dash, you basically get to write whatever the heck you want. I could do data-pizza equals 5, and that is a completely valid piece of HTML. It will not style the card or affect it in any way. You can select, I'm fairly certain, data attribute selectors in not only jQuery, but just CSS in general. I think we could do .attr. Does it work with data? I can't imagine it. Oh, really? The search? Where's the search? Because it's a pop-up window, so I don't think the search is going to work there. Can I not just open this in a new window? I don't want to have to... Okay, it says the word data on there, so I'm assuming... Oh, because that's where it is. What is jQuery data? Yeah, I know, guys. Dead air, dead air, dead air. Oh, it's just a way to store values and key pairs. Okay, well, that's good to know. Anyway, like I've been trying to say, yeah, so look, this is what I was saying. You could still do data selectors by doing a set of square brackets in CSS or the jQuery selector style here as well. Square brackets, data type, data pizza equals, and the value you're looking for. So, I mean, you could add them to your HTML elements, and they're not going to break anything, right? So yeah, they're a cool way of just storing like values that you may just use in code, right? Like you want something to be stored on an HTML element that you might use in code later, but you don't want it to actually break anything, right? It kind of bridges the gap from HTML to JavaScript. That way we can associate additional data, right? Additional data that are non-standard attributes like class or ID or style. And it makes the HTML more semantic, I think is the term I would try and use here, and more maintainable. And it basically gives us an easy way to just put some data in the DOM and read it later when needed inside of our JavaScript code without affecting anything visible to the user is the big caveat. So like I said, I can add data-pizza and assign it a value, and they're all will have this now. So if I go look at all of my cards after saving and refreshing and looking at my elements, look, data-pizza. Again, the data dash is the normal syntax, and then whatever you want to call it, like your variable name. And I would stick to lower kebab case to make it consistent. So if it was like 2 words, which I'll use here in a moment, data-pizza-yum equals double quotes 5, right? So again, we get to store information on the card and be able to read it from JavaScript without affecting the visuals out here at all. So at the moment, I'm going to tie them together, but I can make it totally dynamic in the sense that I can do the following. Data-pizza equals type. So I don't have to rely on the text content in the DOM currently. I could rely on, well, I don't know why it'd be on card back. It'd make more sense if it was on like the card element itself, wouldn't it, Luke? My guy. So yeah, like we could interpolate the type into the card element itself. You can see here, yeah, so data pizza. That gives us a way of really honing in, and we can now separate it from the visual text if we wanted to. So if we switch them to like render emojis or icons or pictures instead, but I want to keep the logic in my code simple, I can still leave it as A, B, C, and Ds, for example, but have it be related or drawing different symbols that people are matching, but keep my code simple. That way I don't have to write a case saying, hey, if the paint icon meets the paint icon, the like paint emoji meets the paint emoji, do this. If the two images they clicked on are a match, find that out somehow if their image source is the same and match them. This way I can always just correlate them as letters A, B, C, and D, for example, and I can change their text to be whatever I want in terms of rendering to make it a bit more complex for our users than just simple letters if I chose to do that. So, like I said, data attributes, pretty cool if you didn't know about them. I'm going to call this one card type because that makes sense to me, data-card-type. Will tell me what type of card this is and whether or not it's successfully matched in the flip cards array. So all that effort to explain what a data attribute is and how you can use it, to simply add this to my create card elements. When I make them, I add that attribute and it will be dynamic to the type of card that it is, which will now come down yonder and allow me to write the following code. Let's for now simply console log a value so I can show you how this works. We're going to write card1 dot data, right? Yeah, dot data is the one I want. Store and probably get as well, I imagine, right? Or return the value at the named data store for the first element, right? So the data store, so we're going to do card1 dot data is a function. Everything in jQuery is pretty much a function. And we're going to write card dash type. Now you notice I don't write data dash card dash type because it's assumed that if I'm accessing data stored on an HTML element, I'm going to be retrieving it by the name of that variable we made up, and it's going to assume it's looking for data dash as an attribute on the card element anyway. So that should output what the card type is in our console once I save and refresh the browser. Oh, there it is, yeah. So card1. I don't know why I didn't do both. Let's just do card2 as well. So copy paste, card2, sorry, the format there. Save the file and refresh the browser. Click, click, there we go. And that right there, those strings are both capital case because of the way I wrote my array when we started the game, for those of you that caught up quickly on the code. Yeah, there's my array of card types. That's where those string values came from. Because I wrote that and it's going to be a constant in my code, I can absolutely use these data attributes and these capital case strings inside of a direct comparison. Now, for overall readability, check this out. We're going to do the following. I will simply say type 1 and type 2 will make my code a little bit easier to read than writing card1.data card type equals card2.data. Maybe you like that and don't care. That's fine. I'm going to make my life a little bit easier here and write the following. If type 1 equals type 2, that means we have a match. Console log match. Otherwise, console log no match, because we didn't get a match between the two cards we clicked on. And wouldn't you know it, that already, by working through this and thinking about our pseudocode, already kind of has the logic that we were looking to do. If the flip cards are a match, let us know. Otherwise, flip them back and let us know. For now, let's just stick to the console log to make sure it can work. Save the file, refresh your browsers. BA is a no match indeed. AB would be a no match as well. Oh, because I didn't clear the array, so it didn't build up and get two types. Okay, so let's try and get lucky here. I'm going to have to guess until I get it right. This is never going to happen, isn't it? Okay, there we go. So yeah, it recognizes matches and it recognizes no matches. So the match for now is what we're going to leave in place because we're going to work on that logic momentarily. But in terms of no match, we don't have to log that unless you don't want to. All we got to do is technically flip our cards back. And that's why I wanted to move that logic into a utility function, because you never know how much easier it could be to move things around with functions rather than having to cut and paste blocks of code over and over and over again. So let's see if it works now, because now we should theoretically be able to actually play the game. Yeah, I mean, technically, if we're talking about minimum viable product or MVP, technically this is a completed card matching game, just without the frills. No match, flip back. What's this? A, that was A? We got a match. Disable, check mark, something, but I can't click them now. But match the game. We got it, y'all. We have successfully beaten this game, and that's what I'm talking about. But now we need to have logic that actually detects how many matches total we have so we can calculate the end of the game. So rather than just leaving it at, hey, we matched the cards, we actually need to have some logic that says all cards are now matched. And there's actually a pretty easy technique to do that, believe it or not. And to do that, we need to figure out how I want to mark them as matched, which I might do in the next video because that'll be more about styling. And while I found a cool way to make them go into check marks and dim them out, like change their opacity and shrink them a little bit so it looks like they're disabled and out of the way and unclickable, I haven't really settled on it yet, and I might just kind of have to do it in a live coding video where y'all complain about me rambling about style for 40 minutes and not getting anything done. But yeah, rather than just matching them, we need to have some kind of function that determines how we'll match them and also track some data in the background. So you guessed it, mark as matched. The purpose of mark as matched is going to be up here. Instead of console logging match, we're going to call mark as matched when the two types are indeed a match. What I need to determine is, like I said, somehow remove disable cards that are matched. We need to also clear flipped cards, because again, which that's easy. I mean, clear flipped cards is an array, so all we have to do is take flipped cards and reassign it an empty array, just like we did when we flipped them back on a no match, right? Because it removed them from the two elements from the array, because it's time to start getting another two cards to match together. So clearing the flip cards is easy enough. Now, something else I need to do is I need to count how many total matches I have on the screen, which we made this variable in a previous video, and I said don't worry about it until later. And surprise, that's what its purpose is. We need to count how many matches total we have. So at the moment, I have one match total. I now have two matches total, and that should tell the game it's over and time to play again, collect your wins, pay out, cash out, I don't know. More coffee, hashtag professional. I made this myself, actually. Not the jar, I mean the coffee. I worked at a coffee shop for 10 years before I learned how to code in my early 30s. Fun fact about me. And although any of my students know that, because a lot of times when we do like instructor interviews, you get to know me, and I always tell y'all that my background is food service and not programming. Yeah, this is an Ethiopian bean I did as a Japanese style iced pour over using a V60. For my coffee nerds out there, get in the comments if you're a coffee nerd like me. Okay, so flip cards, and like I said, we have to count the number of matches. So our match counter will increase by 1, and a lot of times, as y'all know, I like to we're going to increase the match counter, and that's what we want to do here. I also need to somehow remove or disable the cards. For now, like I said, I'm not going to worry about styling. What I'm going to simply do is set a timeout that says, y'all know it, after like a second of it displaying to the user, oh, you got it, like that little delay feel, it will then take the current flipped cards, and for each card in that array, simply flip it back, or in our case, remove it, right? So remove that stuff there. And, I'm going to move all this logic in the timeout for now. So we're going to say, hey, when their mark is matched, delay a little bit, because maybe we'll play something on the screen or have a small animation that will be associated with it. I don't know. I'm just kind of hedging my bets right now. Simply look through the cards we have flipped, because remember, if we've gotten this far, they are a match. So delete them from the screen entirely. Clean them out from the array to prepare for the next two we're possibly matching. and count the number of total matches we have so far, because it will be integral in the next bit of logic. If all cards matched, then we will log all matches made. Congrats, right? Congratulate ourselves because we completed the game. We have made all the matches. So what's an easy way to figure out if all the cards have been matched? Well, they have to be in even pairs in this array. So whatever my card type's array length is, because there has to be a pair for every single card, unless we're just evil and they can never finish the game, it can never be odd. All we need to do is take the length of this array, divide it by 2, and that's how many matches possible there are, right? Because again, everything has to come in pairs, right? So if it's in pairs, we divide by 2, that's how many pairs there are. And if we had that many matches, that means the game's over. So what we're going to do is a cool little trick that, again, it's easy to overthink until you have someone on screen tell you how to think about it. If our match counter variable, and again, we have to make sure this if statement is, sorry, my nose is like itchy. We have to make sure we check after we update the match counter. So we update match counter and then check its value against the card types array length divided by 2. And if that's a match, pun intended, then it should be truthy, which means all matches are made because the game's technically over. So again, we'll have to add some styling later because simply removing the cards from the screen is kind of jank, but it's gonna get the job done. And we want some visual to indicate those cards aren't clickable anymore. And this is what I'm gonna settle on for this particular video. And let's go ahead and see if it works. So no match, they flip. B, they disappeared. A, they disappeared. And all matches made. Congratulations. Let's go ahead and add another set of cards. We're going to go up yonder to the card types array. Let's see if this logic is scaling as it should. We're going to add AA, BB, CC, and refresh. There's our cards. Ooh, now it's going to get complex. Y'all going to watch me be an idiot. Yeah, I'm a genius. All right. Boom and boom. There you go. The logic we have written so far at placing, at shuffling, at flipping, at unflipping, flipping back, and counting matches until they're all done. Again, just because all the cards are removed from the DOM doesn't tell our code the game is technically over. Even if I want it, I could technically do it that way. I can say if there are no card children inside the game board, the game is done. But we're tracking the state. We're managing the state of this game from these variables right here. These 3 variables are the state of the game. So we're telling the DOM to simply update along to what the state should be. So even though I said I'm not making a React project, you can see I have like a lot of React thinking where I have state variables that I update and I tell the DOM to reflect those updates over time or afterwards, right? So yeah, we have it logging all matches made. And in the next video, I actually want to go forward a bit more and add some more styling. We're going to probably add like a total games counter. So if you play multiple times, you can have like a high score leaderboard type situation. We should probably have some kind of, rather than logging right here, we should have some output on the screen that says, congrats, all matches have been made, play again. And we'll talk about how we can style the cards a little bit to make them appear disabled and dimmed out instead of just removed entirely. So we're going to save that for the next video because, again, I like to keep these around 40 minutes to an hour, and we're about at the 38-ish minute mark. So I think that's enough for this video. Because, again, this technically gets a huge part of the game. This is the game. The game is done. We have hit minimum viable product, MVP. We have done it. I could ship this and say, hey, person that asked me to code this memory card matching game, you did it. If you want to make the game bigger, you go to this array, modify it, save it, and the static site will refresh in the browser, and then you could just go play the game. So, there's plenty of little bells and whistles we could add here for more complex features, but the goal of building a memory card matching game is done. And in the next video, we'll add the bells and whistles I was talking about. In the video after that, I'll actually begin thinking how I want to build out the website to have like a navigation bar or a side drawer with a hamburger icon that we can open and close, that we can then say, hey, here's the list of games that we've written so far. So this is like this ultimate portfolio side of all these little games we're going to code. Again, a lot like those gaming websites I goofed on as a kid all the time back in the day to burn time by playing a bunch of browser coded mini games, typically done in Flash and Flash Animation Studio and things like that. So yeah, do the YouTube thing. Make sure y'all like, comment, and subscribe on this video. If you have any feedback where this series is going, I'd love to hear it. Make sure you check our description for our community membership. Remember, all of our courses, any updates, any new courses, our Discord community, access to me and help from us on your coding journey. You'd be surprised how much it can help having a mentor that actually cares to be supportive and give you positive feedback and not just tear you down or insult you. And more direct feedback on how these video series, what these video series are, what content I make, and whatnot. So if you're interested, check the link in the description down below. You'll find our GitHub for this as well, and any other relevant links I always have in the videos I try and include as well. So that's it for this video. I'll see you on the next one. We talk more about styling and those additional bells and whistles on this little game.